Hello and welcome to Unsportsmanlike Conduct, the show where two British brothers talk all things NFL. I'm your host, Dom Corbs, and I'm joined with my co-host, Nick Corbs, for our Week 4 NFL review. Nu, give us one word to describe Week 4.
One word to describe Week 4, Dom. I'll go with ordinary.
I think
that's what
why ordinary?
Not too many upsets. Obviously, there'll be some stuff that we're talking about today, but nothing really stood out to me as much as it did in the previous weeks. Well, how would you summarize Week 4 in one word, Dom?
Oh, you've counted one word. I'd do. You put me on the spot here, dude. Jeez. I'd do common.
Common? Yeah, see, I think we're thinking the same themes here.
I was jumped by yours, but what we're going to talk about in today's show is the best bits from Week 4, obviously. So we're going to start with Bills-Ravens, move on to talking about Jayden Daniels, a big contentious point of mine, given my pre-draft takes on him. We'll talk about the Giants as well, news team, and then we'll round it off talking about Drake Maye and a few overrated and underrated teams. But let's definitely start with what I think was the best game of the week for quite a few reasons. Is Bills-Ravens. Nu, what do you think about the Bills-Ravens?
Well, best game of the week outside of Alabama-Georgia, but I think that's another time for another podcast. Bills-Ravens.
If only a college football pod.
Yeah, maybe sometime soon, who knows. But Bills-Ravens, quite a surprising game for me, actually. I thought Josh Allen for the first 3 weeks has been spectacular. But what I really think happened in the game showed that he doesn't really have that many receivers to throw to. When Diggs was traded in the offseason, that was a massive worry. And over the first 3 weeks, they answered my worries, really. Josh Allen looked just as good. The run game was really developing. Dalton Kincaid really was appearing as that number one guy. But I think today, the lack of receiving threats really, really showed for the Bills.
Yeah, it was something that we all saw coming as well, which is a little bit frustrating because I think this team is essentially just Josh Allen FC. Like, if he's cooking, then they're cooking. And if you shut down Josh Allen, which is what the Ravens defense managed to do, and I'll talk about the Ravens, and we'll talk about the Ravens a little later, then you shut down the Bills offense. I mean, I said at the time, Nu, and I don't know what your take on this was, is that Keon Coleman, while a great receiver prospect, didn't fit what the Bills needed in a proper outside wide receiver. Yes, he's having to play 100% of his snaps out wide, not in the slot, which is where I think his skill set was much better suited to. But that just means that they're not getting the most out of him as a result. Like, he had a 30% contested catch rate in 2003 for Florida State. And we saw on that drop down the sideline when he tried to kind of catch a ball over his shoulder, but then also kind of half tried to high point it. That's not his skill set. And so I thought it was really questionable at the time to draft Keon Coleman, who definitely projected for most people as a slot receiver, when they have Khalil Shakir already on the roster. They got Dalton Kincaid already on the roster. And those guys, obviously they play very different roles, but they're the guys you want in the slot. One's a big slot receiver as a tight end. The other one's that shiftier kind of gadget guy in Khalil Shakir. So I thought you're right, that the receivers were really left lacking. I was kind of shocked at the lack of a downfield passing attack by the Bills in this game.
Yeah, and that's Josh Allen's best trait. That's what he makes his money on, using his legs and then the deep ball, the big play, the hero ball. In terms of big-time throws, Josh Allen almost always leads the league. Also in turnover-worthy plays, but that's what you get with Josh Allen. And I think you're right, Don, with the drafting of Keon Coleman, I was really surprised, actually, because it really didn't fit the scheme. He's never been a big-time receiver that gets a lot of separation. And he's too slow to play on the outside in the NFL. And you're so right, Don, with Shakir. I think he's a good player, and I think he will be a good player down the line. And also, he seems really charismatic in interviews and seems like a nice guy. But a nice guy is not going to win you football games. And I don't really see the Bills team getting that far this year, in fact, because of the limited receiver capacity. And you could use similar to the Chiefs. The Chiefs don't really have that many good receivers, especially now with Rashee Rice gone. But I think they just have enough weapons that they can utilize differently, such as Worthy and the running backs at the backfield and Kelsey, which I don't really think the Bills have. I just don't think they have that dynamic an offense right now.
I think the Worthy touchdown on the weekend, that just bomb where
78 yards, something ridiculous. It was an amazing throw.
Exactly, where Worthy just ran and Mahomes just hit him. Now, Josh Allen can make that throw, and obviously there's that whole thing at the draft time. Oh, they've passed on Worthy, they've given Worthy to the Chiefs. I think that's lazy. I think that's just not how the draft works.
I hate that. I completely hate that.
Yeah. Like, just because you don't draft a player doesn't mean you give them to someone else. Like, you can't draft a player to prevent another team from getting them. Like, I didn't not I didn't hate the Bills passing on Worthy. I think actually now that the irony is that they kind of need that speed, that X factor. Like, yeah, of course, I think you can feed Keon Coleman much more targets than you can Xavier Worthy. But what Worthy offers is that like defense breaking, taking the top off a defense. He can score at any point, kind of threat, which Keon Coleman just does not bring. And to give context for anyone that doesn't really understand the Bills wide receiver depth chart, they've got Keon Coleman, Matt Collins, Khalil Shakir, Marcus Valdez-Scantling, and Curtis Samuel. That's a bottom 5 receiver room in the NFL easily. Marcus Valdez-Scantling is one-dimensional backup with bad hands. Matt Collins, not a starting caliber wide receiver. He is starting at the moment. And obviously they've got like 3 slot receivers in Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, and Dalton Kincaid, as I've said. It just lacks they're lacking a vertical passing attack. And it was really clear in this game. They lack dynamic playmakers. Ironically, it felt a bit like the Ravens offense of recent years. You know, when it's just, you've got Mark Andrews and you've got running backs, and you've got Bateman and you've got Flowers. Like, again, almost ironically, those guys are quite similar as well. And that it lacks a real X alpha wide receiver one that you can put on the outside like 75% of the time. But I think that's it. I think the Bills are a good team because Josh Allen is at the moment playing like the best quarterback in the league. Now he's my QB2 behind Mahomes, but for this season, he's the best quarterback in the league. And if it's just him, they are not going to beat teams like the Ravens.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. But I do think we need to put some respect on the Ravens' name here. You know, they really did executed a great game plan. Unc Henry seems to be back right at it. 87-yard touchdown. He looks rejuvenated, and you know, for all fantasy owners out there, that's probably good. But I thought the Ravens played a really, really good game and bounced back from what was honestly a surprisingly slow start.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Ravens start, they were always better than their record, and we said this on the pod. Like, they literally lost to the Chiefs by a toe. Like they were always the talent on this roster with Lamar Jackson, who's a great quarterback, and they have great talent on the roster as well, and the defense particularly. They were never going to be below 500, but I think the Derrick Henry play, the opening one, kind of really showed the difference in the game plan with these two teams. Like, the Ravens came out in 21 personnel, so they had two running backs. One of them was Patrick Ricard, who's 300 pounds.
He's a fullback. He's a fullback.
I know, but you have to count him when they're doing the personnel groupings as a running back. But yeah, you're right. He is a fullback. He's 300 pounds. He's also on the field so often this year. It's actually kind of crazy. But they come out 21 personnel, so 2 running backs and a tight end in Mark Andrews. And the Bills matched that in nickel. So they had 2 linebackers and 5 defensive backs, which is a lighter personnel package. And they got gashed for an 87-yard run on the first play of the game. And then for the second Derrick Henry touchdown, they finally had 3 linebackers on the field. And the Ravens had 22 personnel, so 2 tight ends, 2 running backs. But this time they threw it, and a linebacker had to try and cover Derrick Henry in the flat. So I just think the Bills lost that chess match. I think the Ravens were firing on both sides of the ball, but this was the Ravens team that we've kind of been waiting for all year.
Yeah, Dom, I agree. Like, watching Derrick Henry out on Damar Hamlin looked like an under-15s game, and he was the first guy to hit puberty. He was so much bigger, so much faster, so much stronger. And you're right. How is a nickel corner going to deal against Derrick Henry, even if he's not in his prime? The Bills, schematically, I really did not think played a strong game today at all.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it with the nickel. Like, forget Derrick Henry, who's 250 pounds. He might have a 300 pound Patrick Ricard running right at him. Like, he'll just get deleted off the field. Like, you've got to. I know it's difficult because the Bills, especially in the modern NFL, you can pass from any formation, and the Bills, obviously, with even someone like Patrick Ricard, who's like up there with like Carl Juszczyk, like, well, there's not very many of them, but in terms of like the multi-positional ability of a fullback, they can pass from any formation, and that obviously happened on the second touchdown. But to come out in nickel against the Ravens in like the first drive of the game, I think is absolutely unhinged. And the Ravens defense took time to find their feet under their new defensive coordinator, because obviously now Mike Mack is the head coach of Seattle. But the Bills were 3 for 13 on third down, and they were getting home against 7-man protection with just 4 rushes because they were blitzing late, they were showing pressure at the line, dropping back. Like, it was that classic Bills defense which we saw from last year. And they shut down Josh Allen. He was pressured on almost half of his dropbacks. Yeah, he's a hero. Yeah, he can play a hero ball. He can put an offense on his back and turn a game around easily. But you can't do that under those situations, even as for a quarterback as great as Josh Allen.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. You know, I think we've said it all. Josh Allen, great player. I still my front runner for MVP because I think he's going to drag this Bills team to a 12-4 record somehow. But once he starts facing these proper teams, these Ravens types, the Chiefs types, I don't see him getting past that.
It's those harder teams, exactly. But talking about MVP, because it was brought to my attention today that Jayden Daniels is a 50-1 MVP contender. Shout out to Ben Shepley, who needs haters when you've got friends like him. But we're going to talk about the Commanders now and Jayden Daniels. They played the Cardinals. And Nu, what's your take?
Well, Dom, I think Jayden Daniels has proved me and you wrong, to be honest. I was very skeptical of Jayden Daniels. I had Drake Maye over him in my rankings. I even had him near JJ McCarthy, which, I'm embarrassed to admit, but he looks excellent. And he's really, really ramped this dead Commanders franchise that's been dead for maybe a decade. Terry McLaurin and look at the quarterbacks that he's caught a touchdown from. It's literally just guys who are probably now Uber drivers or analysts somewhere. That is not a good list. You've got Taylor Heineke on there. It's been a graveyard of quarterbacks over the last decade. And Jayden Daniels really seems to be the saviour. And another thing I got wrong, Cliff Kingsbury seems to be really, really working with this Commanders franchise, with the team. Obviously, Jayden Daniels has the highest rookie completion percentage out of any rookie, minimum 75 attempts. And this is because, of the system that Cliff Kingsbury runs, which is get the ball out of the hands fast, get it to your receivers, spread it out wide. But that's also opening up the vertical passing game, which I haven't seen from the Commanders maybe ever. And I think it's a really, really big worry for the NFC East.
All right, let me cook here, Nu. So I think
Okay.
when you say I had him, close to JJ McCarthy, which I'm embarrassed to admit. What I've learned is that we've only just had week 4. There's still a lot of football to play, and I think that you don't need to march back your takes just yet. Now, the nuance there is that, yes, I completely agree. Jayden Daniels has already looked a lot better than I thought he would this early on. I said the Commanders would be the worst team in the NFL. They're quite clearly not. They are a lot better than I thought, and that is definitely, I'm 100% able to admit that. I'm not that stubborn. To be clear to the people that didn't listen to my amazing pre-draft takes, my concerns with Jayden Daniels in the pre-draft process were essentially 3 big things. The first was his inability to avoid sacks. He had a 26% sack rate, which is the second highest in 10 years out of any quarterbacks coming out of college. And as we know, sacks are absolute drive killers in the NFL. The second is that he didn't throw over the middle of the field. That offense in LSU with Brian Thomas Jr. and who was the second?
Nabers.
Oh, and Nabers, of course. Just feasted on slot fades, essentially. It was all go routes. There was the Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas Jr. Those guys were cooking this week. Both of them on the same team with a quarterback who, for all his flaws, can throw a very, very nice deep ball.
It's beautiful, Dom. It's a work of art.
It's a very, very nice, and we saw it in week 1. And the third is that he needs to avoid Looney Tunes style hits. He was taking the most obscene hits you'll ever see a quarterback take in college. It was one of my favorite tweets from Nate Tice of The Athletic said that his pro comp was Johnny Knoxville. It looked like he got hit with a Acme hammer at every other game. His shoes flying off, his helmet whipping back. And he's a slender guy, and he's a rushing threat, and so he's going to open himself up to those kind of hits. And I was really worried he wouldn't have the wherewithal to avoid those hits, and he'd get injured, a bit like we're seeing with Anthony Richardson, ironically a very different statured quarterback. Now, to address the first point, he's 13th in pressure to sack rate at the moment through 4 weeks, so 25%, which really has not been an issue so far. But here's the thing. He has faced teams with terrible pass rush. So the Bengals had an all-time bad pass rushing performance against the Commanders last week. He had a 3.13 time to throw in the pocket, which is really, really high. Anything above 2.8 seconds is high. And Jayden Daniels had 3.13 seconds in the pocket. And the Bengals are 30th in total sacks. The Cardinals somehow managed to see that performance and say, okay, Bengals, hold my beer. We're going to have 0 sacks against you. We're going to try and put our best pass rusher, Dennis Gardeck, to somehow try and sack you. And look, Jayden Daniels did use his legs yesterday to get out of 1 or 2 sacks. But nevertheless, the Cardinals finished the day with 0 sacks. If you watch the tape, Jayden Daniels is making some great throws, and he's actually targeting the middle of the field, which was what one of my things that I also had against him, is that he just didn't target the middle of the field, and it fed on slot fades. he's doing that, but he has all the time in the world. The pocket at the moment is brilliant. And that, for me, I think is why I'm not yet going to come out here and say, all right, guys, I'm wrong. Look, I'm happy to admit that I'm already wrong to an extent. But we've not yet seen Jayden Daniels have to do it against a team that has even just a decent pass rush. And I think that when they do, because the Commanders' offensive line really is not that good. What Cliff Kingsbury does really well is he has extra men in protection. So he leaves the tight end in protection, he leaves the running back in protection. So he's protecting him that way. But when they meet a team that genuinely can pin their ears back and rush the passer to at least a competent degree, I think we might see a potentially different version of Jayden Daniels. So I'm going to keep my powder dry for the full-on apology tour until I see him against a genuine defense, which I think could give him and the offensive line some trouble.
But Dom, I think that's a really interesting point, and also to contextualize his success. Because one thing that I was really impressed by Jayden Daniels, which you rarely see with rookie quarterbacks, is the wherewithal in the pocket. I understand he's not getting pressured, but he's not rolling out when there isn't any pressure. Which, if you were unfortunate enough to watch the Broncos versus the Jets, you saw Bo Nix do a couple of times. Even though you're right, Dom, his offensive line is helping him, and the scheme is helping him, and the team he's going against are helping him. He's still keeping his eyes downfield, staying calm, staying relaxed, and making the right decisions. And I think that confidence that is now instilled in him will help him when he does face pressure, when he faces teams that can blitz and teams that have with elite edge rushers. Think about the Eagles, even the Giants with Burns and Thibodeau, and the Cowboys with Parsons. He's one of the best pass rushing divisions in football. He will face them, and I think this start that's helped him, it's a bit easier of a start, will help him against those worst teams because he has more confidence.
Yeah, but that's the thing with the NFC East, and we'll talk about that in a second once we finish this, is that I don't think that is a really great pass rushing unit. I think that Kayvon Thibodeau is fraudulent. We discussed him already.
He's crap. But Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns are still great players.
Dexter Lawrence will, to be fair, and there's nothing worse than pressure up the middle as a quarterback as well. But I just think Parsons, this is kind of going off topic a little bit, but Parsons has been kind of neutralized the last couple of games. Like Andrew Thomas he was injured by the end of the game, but Andrew Thomas really did a great job against him, considering that Andrew Thomas got absolutely bullied by Myles Garrett the week earlier when they played the Browns. Parsons was kind of nowhere to be seen, really. And so I question where this game is going to come from. I think it's going to come from the Ravens, which they're playing in a few weeks. They got the Ravens, they got the Bears, and they got the Browns in the next 4 weeks. So that's a bit of a step up in terms of defensive opponents. But again, when the Browns have a terrible offense, and when the Bears might also have a terrible offense, is it that much of a issue? Because obviously, yeah, Jayden Daniels isn't going against the offense, but if the defense are always on the field, then they're very tired. It's harder for them to rush the passer. So I just think that with Jayden Daniels, I'm pleasantly surprised. I'm happy to admit that. I think Cliff Kingsbury also is doing a good job at protecting his quarterback. I think there's plenty of valid concerns for Cliff Kingsbury. I think the highs are high, but the lows are really low, and we've seen high highs, but we're yet to see those low lows. We might not, but going into the game, the Commanders were second in screen passes, fifth in RPO attempts, fifth in total rushing attempts by their running backs, and eighth in play action. So they're trying to take as much as they possibly can off Jayden Daniels' play, and I think that's the right thing to do. I'm not knocking Jayden Daniels or Cliff Kingsbury for doing that. That's what the Texans did with CJ Stroud and Bobby Slowick last year, is play a kind of dumbed down version of the offense, let the quarterback develop, let him find his feet in a much faster, bigger, stronger, harder league, and then take it from there. But I just think the bottom line for me with Jayden Daniels is the game against the Bengals was amazing. Absolutely no denying that. And he played very, very well against the Cardinals as well. But I think when he comes across a team with a better pass rush, I think we might see a different version of Jayden Daniels.
Okay, that's fair. And also, Dom, I just quickly to butt in, the fact that the Cardinals are still paying Cliff Kingsbury and he put 42 points to them puts a smile on my face. I think that is hilarious.
Are they still paying him?
Still paying him. So Cliff Kingsbury revenge tour, I'm here for it.
Man, we need to get in the NFL, man. Teams just pay you to not play for them. Like Russell Wilson getting paid by the Broncos, Cliff Kings getting paid by the Cardinals. Like that's the gig you want in life.
Oh, it's like being the backup quarterback, third choice goalkeeper. It's the dream.
Oh yeah, I want disgraced OC. Maybe I can make it. Maybe this pod will take it. It'll take us there. But talking about potentially maybe having a disgraced OC, that brings us then to a fellow NFC East contender, your team, the New York Giants. Now they played fellow NFC East Dallas Cowboys on Thursday. What do you think about that game, Nu?
Well, Dom, I think there's two headlines to take from this game, and they're both from the Giants' point of view. The Giants should have won that game. You can either see it as the Malik Nabers coming out tour, absolutely amazing, or you can see it as Daniel Jones holding back the offense. It really depends if you're pint half full, pint half empty. But I'm going to focus on Nabers because it makes me happy, and talking about Daniel Jones makes me sad, to be honest with you. So Malik Nabers, what a player. He is amazing. I've seen that Andrew Booth double move maybe 100 times. I'm in the library just watching it over and over and over again. But on the exact same play, you see Daniel Jones. That is a touchdown. If that ball is even remotely okay thrown, that's six for Nabers. Instead, he has to stop, settle, catch it, tackled, field goal. I've saw online, Tyrod Taylor wins this football game. I think Drew Lock wins this football game. I think there's many other quarterbacks in the NFL that could win that football game. And it's so unfortunate because I really wish the best for Nabers, but it's a ruined year for him, unfortunately, because of the play of Daniel Jones.
You took the words out of my mouth there, Nu. That was you nailed it. The Giants, for context, lost that game 15-20 against the Cowboys, and they kicked 5 field goals. It was a 5-point loss, and they kicked 5 field goals. There was, as you say, Nu, Nabers had a potential touchdown taken off the board because Daniel Jones underthrew him. He had to turn around. It looked like someone catching a punt. He was facing the wrong end zone. There was a whip route on 3rd and 9 when Nabers was running it against linebacker Marvin Overshone, had the angle to get the first down and more, but Daniel Jones put it on his back hip. He had to turn around the other way. He got tackled. And then there was a wide open ball on a free play to Darius Slayton, which was picked off. It was a free play, so that's not the end of the world. But the ball, rather than being a touchdown or like having it on the 10-yard line, it went back to the Giants 40. So that kind of performance, leaving that many big plays on the table as a starting quarterback in the NFL in a 5-point loss where you kicked 5 field goals, is an unacceptable performance. And Brian Daboll and the front office are now playing for their jobs. It's sink or swim in New York. It's every man for himself. And they're going to do everything they can to not go down with that Daniel Jones ship. And I don't blame them because we've seen enough from Daniel Jones. We've known for 2 years that he's not the quarterback that the Giants are going to win with. But they kind of tied themselves to him early on, and it was a mistake. But what do you think is going to happen now then with Drew Lock?
Well, I think Drew Lock should start. I think it's something different. I think with Daniel Jones, you know what you're getting. It's almost similar to, not quite, but Bryce Young in Carolina, where it's, you know what you're going to get out of him. There's no like, oh, what if, maybe if. No, he had one good season, and he's got paid very well for it, which made me look like an idiot. My flatmates bring up every single week when the Giants play. Oh, Nick, I remember when you brought this up, and I hate it every time. He is done, man. He's done. And I think Drew Lock should start and he should take this team forward. I don't think the Giants are going to make the playoffs. I don't think the Giants are going to do anything of note. But Drew Lock is probably the 32nd best quarterback in the NFL. And that's better than the 40th. And I think that's the situation you got to choose.
But what then would you do with the Giants front office with Brian Daboll? Would you give them another year? Would you make it like a Matt Eberflus, like potentially like a lame duck head coach? Because obviously you're going to draft a quarterback if depending on the draft and who declares and where you end up picking, we can assume at this point that you will be in the quarterback market come the draft. Would you then give Brian Daboll and this front office the chance to rejuvenate their careers, or would you also kind of throw the baby with the bathwater and say, you know what, guys, you're done as well?
That's a really good question, Dom. And I think what my take is I think as a head coach in the NFL, you maybe get one life. Daboll had a great season, bad season, bad season. It's starting to look like a fluke rather than the other way around. Good coaches make their team better, and I don't think Daboll's doing it. However, Shane, the GM, still a big fan of him. He made the wrong decision with Jones and Barkley. Barkley's balling out. Jones is playing terribly. We can all agree with that. But at the time, it wasn't that bad a decision. Obviously, he's aged like milk, but that happens. Also, I think he's drafted well and he's traded well. Brian Burns was a good addition for a second-round pick. He still hasn't played maybe as good as he did in Carolina, but he had a great game against the Browns and another good game against the Cowboys. I also think he drafted Drew Phillips this year in the 3rd round, which is the highest graded corner rookie. Looks like a good player. Deonte Banks, listen, he gets torched by good receivers, but he's a cornerback too, which isn't that bad value. I quite like Joe Shane, but Daboll needs to go.
Yeah, also there's just so many good young offensive minds coming through the NFL consistently. Like, if it's not too harrowing for the Giants to go in the Bills' offensive coordinator kind of pit again, then Joe Brady, I think, is really, really good in Buffalo. Like, he's someone that had, like you say, new coaches have kind of one life. He was at the Carolina Panthers after that insane LSU season with Joe Burrow. He was kind of the scapegoat for the offensive woes there, which we now are well aware that they ran a lot deeper than a brand new offensive coordinator. But I think there's just always such a good flow of offensive minds that I think the risk to reward of parting with Dable or potentially finding an upgrade for me means that I would get rid of Dable as well, because I think that the risk of keeping him and having just another year of wasted players with a year on their contract and having a young quarterback have to learn a second playbook and kind of find his feet in another offense. I think I just cut my losses and say, you know what, we're going to clean house. I might keep Joe Schoen, like you said, the GM, but I think I would also get rid of Brian Dable. But then that brings us on then, New, to talking about a rookie quarterback potentially having a year wasted, or not, maybe he's saved, is Drake Maye for the New England Patriots.
Yeah, Dom, Jacoby Brissett had a terrible game. I don't think there's any two ways of going about it. A pick six. I don't even think he threw a touchdown. I might be wrong, but I don't. He looked absolutely terrible back there. And I think the argument against playing Drake Maye is letting him sit. You know, the team will be fine with Brissett. The team's not fine with Brissett. Unless Drake Maye is that far behind in development, I think he has to start. What do you think, Dom?
He's got to start. Okay, I think that Operation Human Shield is working really well in New England right now. Let poor Jacoby Brissett continue to be the canary down the coal mine and just keep Drake Maye on the sidelines. The offensive line is simply not good enough in New England. Nobody in the NFL has a higher drop back pressure percentage than Jacoby Brissett at 46.4%, the highest in the NFL. You cannot put a rookie quarterback in that situation and expect him to develop. He's not even going to not develop. He'll actively regress. I mean, we've kind of seen it with Caleb Williams already. Like, Drake Maye is a player who has some X factor ability, but also has a tendency to kind of play some YOLO ball a bit along that Josh Allen vein. If you put in Drake Maye with the terrible offensive line he's got, with the subpar offensive weapons, I think you are just going to compound his negative traits, which is going to stunt his development. Now, I think that I'm also a little worried about the coaching. I think that it's kind of going under the radar because obviously the players, the talent in New England simply is not there. But Alex Van Pelt is the offensive coordinator when we're seeing the likes of Matt LaFleur, Kevin O'Connell, Sean McVay, great coaches succeed with subpar situations. Like, look, McVay has the same record as the Patriots do at the moment. They've both won one game. But the Rams look a hell of a lot better than the Patriots do. And with the injuries, I'd argue that they have the same level of talent. Obviously, Matthew Stafford is a considerably better quarterback than Jacoby Brissett. But nevertheless, I'm not swimming with confidence that even if Drake Maye does go in, whether that be next year or sooner, that he'll be able to succeed even like someone like Jayden Daniels, who with someone like Cliff Kingsbury, who's a far from perfect offensive coordinator. Like, I like what he's done with Jayden Daniels. He's protected him. I don't see Alex Van Pelt being able to elevate the talent around Drake Maye or Drake Maye himself.
But I think you put it really well there. And I think what the biggest thing with Maye is that there isn't any expectation for him. People understand how bad this New England team is. I don't think he's under the same pressure as Daniels, as Williams, or even a Knicks. I think if Drake Maye comes in, which I predict will be before week 8, I think you would agree?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
I think when he comes in, all he needs to do is flash talent. He doesn't need to play well because I think everyone understands the situation he is in isn't going to help him out. I think he just needs to make one or two of those hero ball throws, see why they drafted him to give them hope. And I think that's good for his development, throwing him into the fire a little bit. But I completely understand what you're saying, that it is a sinking ship. And do you want to put a new captain on? Not sure.
It's just not worth it. I think I would put Drake Maye in there towards the end of the season. They have a really late bye week, so maybe after the bye, but definitely not before week 8 because they still play the Jets. I would definitely not. Maybe when they play the Titans, but the Patriots' schedule is insanely tough. I don't know how they've managed to get a schedule like that with where they finished last year, but they've got a really difficult schedule, one of the hardest in the NFL before the season started, and I don't think that's really changed given the teams they're playing and the records they're on. I just think that I would protect Drake Maye. He's not going to elevate the team. and they're not going to be able to elevate him. I think if I've learned anything from this year, it's that quarterbacks like Baker Mayfield, like Sam Darnold, like Geno Smith, to an extent, maybe Bryce Young, we'll see in 5 years, who knows, can get ruined by a bad situation. Why would you bother potentially ruining Drake Maye, who you took with the second overall pick, for the sake of a few games at the end of the season? For me, I'm 50-50 on that. I genuinely am. But if he didn't play, I wouldn't mind.
Yeah, no, Dom, I think that's a good point. We talked about Bryce Young and Carolina being thrown into the fire and not really coming out. But Drake Maye, my pro-con for Drake Maye was Josh Allen. You heard it a lot in the media. He's a very similar star player. And I disagree with you there, Dom. I think Drake Maye has the opportunity to elevate the players around him. He's not a game manager. He is someone who can really win a football game for you. And especially later on in the season when the Patriots are going to be, 8-2, definitely the lower half. 8-2? No, 2-8 rather, sorry.
That's playoffs, mate.
Yeah, no, I know, sorry. I got it confused. Going to have one of the worst records in the NFL. Why not give it a go? Let the opportunity for the offensive coordinator to save his job, for Mayo to keep his job. I think he has to come in, and I think that he has a chance to play well, Dom. But I completely understand what you're saying. He can. It's sink or swim, and you don't want the 4th overall pick to drown.
Second. Well, that's the thing. Is
Daniels.
You're right. No, you're right. You're right. And then it was Marvin. Then it was Patriots.
Yeah, 4th. Yeah.
4th, or was he? Anyway, either way, the Patriots front office aren't going to get fired. They're brand new this year, so I don't think they need to worry about their job. But I think you raise a good point there, New. I think I've just got PTSD a little bit this year from being a big Bryce Young truther and seeing him literally go down in a ball of flame. I do not want the same thing to happen to Drake Maye, who I was very, very vocal about, who I said I would take almost as high as I would take Caleb Williams. They were 1A and 1B for me. I really like Drake Maye, and I just don't want to see him fail. But I think you're right. He is a player whose play style can at least give his receivers a chance to make a play, can bring some chunk plays. Obviously, Jacoby Brissett is a seasoned veteran. He's not there to set the world on fire. He's there to maybe play well enough to get another bridge quarterback job. So I think with the Patriots, it's just a balancing act of making sure they don't ruin Drake Maye and put him in a situation where he's going to flame out of the league in a few years, whilst also trying to show that he is ready to develop. He can play. Give him a bit of kind of put him in there for a few games, let him see what the NFL is all about, and then take it from there. So I think for me, I'd be okay, but wary of anything after week 8, and then I'd be fine with anything after the bye week, I think.
Okay, I think that's a good compromise there. I think we've reached somewhere in the middle.
I'm getting conservative in my old age here. I'm not full of the hot air that I was when I was just last year younger. Now we're going to end the episode, New, with hitting some overrated and underrated teams. Now I've got one overrated team and one underrated team. New, do you want to give us one of yours?
Don't I just quickly start off by saying sorry. I was wrong about the Minnesota Vikings. They look amazing. So they're not underrated. They're not overrated. They are perfectly rated. However, an overrated team for me has got to be the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah.
What's happening? I don't quite understand. Mahomes is throwing as many interceptions as he has touchdowns. Kelsey has disappeared off the face of the earth. Maybe still at the Eras tour. I don't know. Rashee Rice might be out for the season now. He took a nasty hit from Mahomes, which the announcers still managed to say was a great play from Mahomes.
No, that was edited.
Okay. Well, I didn't know that, did I? So
yeah, but we don't have the clip to play.
Anyway, I don't get how they keep on winning games, and I know there's the ref ball argument. I think that's a bit shit. It's a big social media Twitter thing. I don't buy into it either. But they're not as good as their record suggests. They could easily be 0-4 right now. They could have lost to the Chargers, could have lost to the Ravens. They don't look like a strong team, Dom.
The Chiefs are definitely overrated. They were my pick for overrated as well. I think it's the only pick you can have at this point, because there's only 4 teams that are either 4-0 or 0-4, and there's a lot of teams that are in between that. So to say a team that is 2-2 is over or underrated is pretty difficult. But a 4-0 team is staring you in the face as being clearly overrated. Mahomes has said himself he's not playing that well. He's now lost Rashee Rice, who is definitely the wide receiver one. And we were talking about Worthy earlier. He cannot fill that role. He's not a high target receiver. He's like a 2 catches for 98 yards and a touchdown kind of stat line guy. Not the Rashee Rice underneath, going across the middle of the defense, taking slants, etc., etc. They narrowly beat the Bengals, who have not a very good defense. Narrowly beat the Ravens, by a toe for Isaiah Likely. They narrowly beat the Falcons, who are not a fantastic team either. They're fine. I'd say they're kind of the definition of mid at the moment. And they narrowly beat the Chargers, who are essentially in a rebuild. All of those games are one-score games, and they're 4-0. That's what I'm saying is that this early on, when you've only got 4-game sample size, teams can look a lot better than their record suggests, or a lot worse than their record suggests. And I think if you're looking for an overrated team, it has to be the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, Dom, I completely agree. But on the other side of the coin, I think the Chargers are a massively underrated team.
Oh, interesting.
I thought you spoke about it earlier in one of the earlier pods of them being a sleeper pick for the playoffs, and I thought that's ridiculous. I don't see it at all. I'm really coming round to it. Jim Harbaugh's style of coaching, I personally thought was outdated for the NFL. Smash mouth, hard nosed football, running the rock, basically going against analytics. I thought it would be more of a jazzy hire that fails, much like previous college hires we've seen in the past. With Saban to the Dolphins and with Urban Meyer to the Jags. That didn't work out. But he's really, really given this Chargers team an identity. Herbert's still playing well. Johnston is somehow an okay receiver now. I thought he was going to be one of the biggest butts. J.K. Dobbins is coming back. I don't think they're going to be a Super Bowl contender, but I really think they can make a good wild card spot, and I really don't think they're getting enough respect as they should.
Look, what you'll come to learn about my takes is that eventually they're always right. They just might not be immediately right. But the Chargers won, like you said it as well. We mentioned it on the pod. They were always going to be just a good football team, considering that they've always had such massive variance. The Chargers, like it's been Justin Herbert, hero ball or bust, really for them. And to finally have a system where Justin Herbert, who is playing really, really well, again, like because he's not having to make those having to play those insane games. We're not kind of seeing his highlight reel and people aren't really talking about him. But his ability to avoid the blitz in terms of just getting the ball out and standing in the pocket and taking a hit, like I think he is one of the toughest quarterbacks in the NFL. And that just goes so hand in hand with Harbaugh's kind of style of coaching. But then, so your underrated team is the Chargers. My underrated team, now I've mentioned these guys on the podcast before, Nick. Do you want to guess who that is?
Is it the Bengals?
I'm doubling down. My underrated team is the Cincinnati Bengals.
No, fine. Say why, and I'll tell you why not.
So, the defense is obviously a massive problem. A massive problem. That is what's stopping me from still being like, no, I still think they could kind of go all the way. They have no real pass rush, and their run defense since DJ Reader left in the offseason is genuinely abysmal. So because of that, I don't think this team will truly be competitive in the same way that perhaps a Texans, for example, will. But I do think that this offense can carry them kicking and screaming to a potential wildcard spot. They can put up points. The game that Joe Burrow played against Jayden Daniels got all the spotlight because he's a rookie and they won and his game was marginally better. Joe Burrow was absolutely insane in that game as well. That's a classic example of history's written by the victor. Nobody's talking about how well Joe Burrow played in that game. Yeah, they played the Panthers this week, their first win. They still put up a good amount of points against a bad defense, of course. But I do think that in almost like a college-esque way, if they can just put up more points than their opponent can, then I think they can win some games which they perhaps shouldn't with the defense that they have. So I don't think that the Bengals are going to go 12-4 or 12-5, whatever it is. I think they might claw their way to like nine wins, maybe 10. And it just really depends on the strength of the rest of the AFC if they can make it as a potential wildcard spot.
The biggest issue I have with the Bengals, Dom, and why I disagree, is that they're a fundamentally poorly built football team. I think they're built from the outside in. They've got flashy receivers, both of who need new contracts, and both of who seemingly aren't going to get one if you believe Jamar Chase and his camp. Well, I don't know about that. We'll talk about that later. Got a flashy quarterback in Joe Burrow, but you've got no defense, a weak offensive line, no run game. And I completely agree, Dom. Joe Burrow is a superstar quarterback, and he is good enough to drag this team to be okay. But fundamentally, they are not well built. They are not built to survive a long season. They're not built to beat good teams and not built for the postseason. I think all you need to do is, if you're looking at the Bills as a team, you can run the ball, you can put up 30 points and just basically prevent every time, and you're probably going to win. I just don't. I think Zach Taylor as a coach is not a very good coach. I don't like their front office. I don't like the way they've been drafting the last couple of years. I just think that the Bills are going down rather than going up.
I do agree with you, Neil. I do agree with you. I think they are a fundamentally flawed football team, and people like to clown on Joe Burrow being like, "Oh my god, people really thought that this guy was good." It's just recency bias. He obviously didn't play at all last year, and yeah, he had one really great year, but he plays very very good football, I think. And I think the potential plus to them not being as good as I perhaps say is that I think Zach Taylor will finally be gone. I don't know how he stuck around for as long as he has, considering, again, the plethora of offensive talent which comes through the league every single year. And I would gladly welcome a change of coaching, just a cleaning of house in Cincinnati, because they've kind of always been a bit of a poverty franchise, and they don't really deserve Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins that they have. And hopefully they keep them for longer than just this season. But you're right. They are a fundamentally flawed football team, and I think that perhaps I was wrong to not see that when we were doing our preseason takes, and I picked the Bengals for a Super Bowl. But nevertheless, not all of my takes are right at the time. New, they're just early. The Bengals will win a Super Bowl at some point, I'm sure. So, and then when they do, I can say that I was right.
Apart from Sam Darnold, that Sam Darnold take was an absolute gem from you.
I have good takes. This is the thing. I have good takes. I genuinely have good takes. I said that this is to all my haters out there. This is to all my haters. I said that Anthony Richardson would be overrated. Shock horror, he is. I said that Sam Darnold and the Vikings would be good. Shock horror, they are. There's more than just two, okay? But I've been put on the spot. But those are just my two big ones. Those are my two big ones, okay? And I said Shane Waldron's crap. He's obviously very crap. Anyway, before I go off on a rant, let me say to myself, this pod is about level-headedness and research and nuanced takes. But anyway, that brings us to the end of the show. Please like and subscribe if you're listening on YouTube. We are edging our way. Oh, pause. Ooh. We are getting
too much brain rot.
We are getting closer to 100 subscribers. That would be absolutely massive. And if you're listening on Spotify, then please follow. But I've been your host, Dom Corbs. That's my co-host, Nick Corbs. We've been on Sportsmanlike Conduct. Thank you for listening.
Cheers, guys. See ya.